Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has stressed the need to explore new avenues of cooperation to deepen relations with Saudi Arabia. He was speaking to Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, who called on him in Islamabad. The Prime Minister hailed the recently established Coordination Council to boost ties between the two countries. On Afghanistan, Khan said a negotiated political settlement in Afghanistan is crucial to regional peace and stability. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has reiterated calls for a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. In a tweet after speaking to Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, Stoltenberg said the security situation in Afghanistan remains deeply challenging. He said the bloc will continue to support Afghanistan, where violence has risen in recent weeks amid a Taliban offensive as foreign troops withdraw. Cuba has blamed the U.S. for a petrol bomb attack on its embassy in Paris. In a statement, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said the U.S. is responsible for its continuous campaigns for encouraging such behavior and calls for violence against Cuba. Meanwhile, France has condemned the attack, launching a judicial investigation into the incident. Brazil has recorded more than 500 coronavirus deaths and nearly 19,000 new cases overnight. Meanwhile, Pakistan has logged 39 more deaths and more than 3,200 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 194 million people. And in the Tokyo Olympics, Japan has topped the medal standings with 10 golds, followed by the US and China on 9. On day 4 of the games, the Team Japan won the golds in softball and judo's 81-kilogram category in men's event. Earlier, Chinese athletes bagged 2 golds in 10-meter air pistol and air rifle mixed team events. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has stressed the need to explore new avenues of cooperation to deepen relations with Saudi Arabia. He was speaking to Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, who called on him in Islamabad. The Prime Minister hailed the recently established Coordination Council to boost ties between the two countries. On Afghanistan, he said a negotiated political settlement is crucial to regional peace and stability. Earlier, the Saudi Foreign Minister called on his Pakistani counterpart and discussed measures to ease COVID-19 travel curbs to facilitate Pakistani workers back home. Al Saud said the kingdom is looking to expand the dimensions of its relationship with Pakistan through the Saudi-Pakistan Supreme Coordination Council. For more on this, we have with us Manahil Ahmed, our correspondent in Islamabad. Manahil, what areas of cooperation were discussed during the meeting of Prime Minister Imran Khan and Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, and what progress could be expected going forward?
The Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Al Saud, did call upon the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, and he did meet with him, where the two exchanged views on regional and international issues. Matters of mutual interest were discussed between the two leaders, where Prime Minister Imran Khan did raise certain issues with the Foreign Minister. He highlighted how the Pakistani workers who work in Saudi Arabia are stranded in Pakistan due to the COVID-19 travel restrictions, and he asked the Foreign Minister to facilitate these Pakistanis so they can return to Saudi Arabia timely. He also highlighted that how the Pakistani community plays an extremely important role in deepening, cooperation, and how people-to-people linkages is extremely important for cooperation and strengthening of relationship between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. He also thanked the Saudi government for facilitating the Pakistani community within Saudi Arabia by, helping them get vaccinated for the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, he also highlighted Pakistan's role in the Afghan peace process. Prime Minister Imran Khan reiterated that Pakistan stands for a peaceful and stable Afghanistan, and that there is absolutely no military solution in Afghanistan. He also highlighted how the Pakistan-Saudi Supreme Council is an important role and is an extremely important step towards the strengthening of the two brotherly countries, and how it will play an important role towards strengthening cooperation in different fields such as investment, trade, and energy. To this, the Saudi Foreign Minister did reaffirm its commitment towards resolving these issues and taking them up after returning to Saudi Arabia. And he did express hope that this meeting and these recent events will lead to even a stronger and a deeper cooperation between the two countries.
Right. Manahil, what are further engagements of the Saudi dignitary in Pakistan?
Well, the Saudi Foreign Minister arrived in Islamabad earlier today, where he initially met with the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and the two exchanged views on regional and international issues. After that, they did hold a joint stakeout in which they discussed details of their meeting, and where the two did agree on deepening cooperation between the two countries. How they agreed that the whole initiative of a green Middle East and a green Saudi Arabia is in alignment with Pakistan's vision, Prime Minister Imran Khan's vision of a green Pakistan. So, a lot of issues were discussed between the two foreign ministers, after which the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia did call upon other dignitaries in Pakistan. And then he also called upon the Prime Minister of Imran Khan, where they met and they talked on various issues, and various concerns were brought up. And it was a very constructive meeting overall. The Foreign Minister is here for just a one-day visit, and he will be returning after all these meetings are concluded and completed.
Manahil Ahmed, thank you for updating us. And now moving on. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has reiterated calls for a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. In a tweet after speaking to Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, Stoltenberg said, "The security situation in Afghanistan remains deeply challenging." He said the bloc will continue to support Afghanistan, where violence has risen in recent weeks amid a Taliban offensive as foreign troops withdraw. Meanwhile, the US has asked Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan to house nearly 9,000 Afghans are at risk being targeted by Taliban. But Uzbekistan and Tajikistan have indicated they are unlikely to comply with the United States' request, while Russia says around 1,000 of its soldiers would take part in joint military drills in Tajikistan next week near the Afghan border. The drills come amid a deteriorating situation in Afghanistan as foreign troops continue to withdraw. The Pakistan Army has returned 46 Afghan soldiers, including 5 others, to Kabul. The military's media wing says the personnel were amicably handed over along with their weapons. In a statement, it added the repatriation took place at Nawa Pass, border crossing in the tribal district Bajor. The army says Pakistan will continue to extend all kinds of support to our Afghan brethren in times of need. The troops had requested safe passage into Pakistan after losing a military post on the Pak-Afghan border. The army noted that in early July, it had given refuge to a group of 35 Afghan border forces under similar circumstances. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has left for an official visit to the United States. Moeed Yusuf is accompanied by the Director General of Inter-Services Intelligence, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid. The NSA office said Yusuf will hold talks with his U.S. counterpart, Jake Sullivan, and other Biden administration officials. It said bilateral ties, Afghanistan and other regional and international issues are on an agenda. Yusuf will also be interacting with the Pakistani American community, U.S. think tanks and media. His visit is part of high-level bilateral engagements between the two countries. South Africa's head of armed forces, General Redzani Mapwania, has lauded Pakistan's role in regional peace, especially in the Afghan peace process. He said this during a meeting with Pakistan's Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, in Rawalpindi. The military's media wing said matters of mutual interest, regional security situation, and cooperation were also discussed. It said both the dignitaries pledged to play their role for further improvement in bilateral cooperation at all levels. General Bajwa said Pakistan views South Africa as a key country in the African continent. He said Islamabad appreciates South Africa's role in regional peace and development of the African region. In Pakistan, the 73rd martyrdom anniversary of Captain Raja Muhammad Sarwar is being observed today. Hailing from the city of Gujar Khan, he was the first recipient of the country's highest military award, Nishan-e-Haider. He showed immense courage during the war against India in 1948 and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. In a tweet, the military's media wing paid tribute to Sarwar on behalf of the nation. Major General Babar Iftikhar said Sarwar's sacrifice will inspire many generations of defenders. The U.S. and Iraq have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. U.S. President Joe Biden met the Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khatami at the White House. These were their first face-to-face talks as part of a strategic dialogue between Washington and Baghdad. There are currently 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq helping local forces counter what remains of ISIS. Biden said the counter-terrorism cooperation will continue.
Our role in Iraq will be as a dealing with it's just to be available, to continue to train, to assist, to help, and to deal with ISIS as it arrives. But we are not going to be, by the end of the year, in a combat mission.
For more on this, we are joined by James Dorsey, a political analyst from Singapore. James, thank you for your time. Mr. Dorsey, the U.S. and Iraq have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. Is this a proxy war victory for Iran, and why?
Well, I think it was obviously the Americans were already withdrawing from Iraq. You've had major troop withdrawals before that in some ways were turned around or in any case suspended to some degree by the fight against the Islamic State. By and large, the fight against the Islamic State, certainly in Iraq, has been won by the international community. And therefore, the question is why why the United States would want to maintain troops furthermore in Iraq. I think that from the American perspective, it obviously is part of the rejiggering or recalculation of their commitment to the Middle East in general, and they are in the process of trying to negotiate a deal with Iran. So on lots of levels, withdrawing successfully from Iraq makes a lot of sense.
Right. Mr. Dorsey, we have recently seen a re-emergence of ISIS attacks in Iraq. With the U.S. combat forces exiting, do you see the situation worsening?
Well, I think that Iraq's problems are less the Islamic State as such, and much more the problems of governance, of corruption, of widespread discontent, of failure to having delivered so on economic issues and on jobs. U.S. troops aren't going to make the difference on that. So I think in terms of forcing the Iraqi government, and again, you have an Iraqi military with the associated pro-Iranian militias that is perfectly capable of fighting the Islamic State.
Mr. Dorsey, what is the policy shift regarding this region? Does American withdrawal from Afghanistan and now from Iraq signify?
I don't know that this necessarily is going to constitute a policy shift. The withdrawal from Iraq is fundamentally different and in very different circumstances from the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. You're not leaving behind a collapsing situation in Iraq. You're leaving behind a situation that needs a lot of attention, and it needs a lot of support from the international community, including from the United States, but it does not necessarily need U.S. troops.
James Dorsey, thank you for speaking to Indus News. For more on this, we are joined by Yadgar Ismail, a political analyst from Iraq. Ismail, thank you for joining us. Mr. Ismail, the U.S. and Iraq have sealed an agreement to formally end the combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. But President Joe Biden declined to say how many U.S. troops will remain in the country. Will the U.S. keep some of its troops in Iraq despite formal pullout?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Thanks for having me in this news. Well, basically, as we see this agreement, I mean, this has been a continuous process, demand from the Iraqi political parties, from the parliament. We saw that in last year that they wanted the U.S. The combat troops out of Iraq and a complete withdrawal, actually. And then now, to what extent this will be implemented? I mean, according to the agreement that we have seen between the Prime Minister of Iraq and the President of the USA, the pullout, the withdrawal will be by the end of this year. So this means that the U.S., perhaps this administration is continuing the same policy of the previous administration, because let's not forget the fact that there is a consensus amongst the Iraqis, most of them, of course, not all of them, let's be precise, and the Americans to actually finally withdraw and end the combatant mission or the military, of the U.S. Army on Iraqi soil.
Right. Mr. Ismail, with the recent sharp increase in ISIS attacks in Iraq, is this a favorable time for the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces?
Well, the issue with these, basically, the security forces in Iraq are not controlled or directed through one, let's say, channel. For example, there are different groups, different military groups that are directed by different political leaders and different political, we can say, militia leaders. And so that maybe they are sort of technically under the umbrella of commander-in-chief, the prime minister, but then they do not really get their commands from him directly. So the issue of this increase in security risks, attacks here and there, not only by the ISIS, even by other, let's say, extremists, specifically in west and north of Iraq, just on the border with the KRG government, we see that there is movement because of lack of security and lack of coordination between these forces. So the Iraqi forces amongst themselves, they lack a mutual understanding, or perhaps they don't have a mutual planning to deal with these threats. So now if the U.S. withdraws, now there is this consensus amongst many Iraqis, not most of them, that Iraq will undergo a situation similar to the situation we see now in Afghanistan. So an increase of attacks, perhaps neo-ISIS forces will also re-emerge in Iraq.
All right. Mr. Dorsey, how can U.S. military pullback in Iraq benefit Iran?
Basically, it is rather a justification. Otherwise, I mean, the U.S. military forces are not intervening in any way in a political arena. So, but there is a consensus amongst the Iraqis, specifically those who are closer to Iran, that they should get out. Of course, on the other hand, if you are talking about international law, if you are talking about the sovereignty of Iraq, it is better for these forces to have a better definition or another definition. Now, some let's say, experts, some people are even saying that maybe these forces will remain under a different name in Iraq, the U.S. forces. But then on the other hand, of course, they should leave. And as I said earlier, there's this consensus in both in Iraq and USA that this war should end in one way or the other.
Yadgar Ismail, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now it's time to take a short break. Welcome back. In Tunisia, dismissed Prime Minister Hisham Meshrichi says he will hand over the responsibility to whomever the President Gas Said chooses. The country is facing worst political crisis after the president ousted the government and suspended parliament with the help of military. In a statement, Meshrichi said he cannot be a disruptive element and is ready to serve Tunisia from any location. Meanwhile, President Said told major civil society groups that he would protect the democratic path. He added that the freedoms and rights of Tunisians would not be affected in any way. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called on Said to adhere to the principles of democracy and human rights. Moreover, Tunisia's biggest party, the Ennahda, has also called for a dialogue to get out of the political crisis. Cuba has blamed the U.S. for a petrol bomb attack on its embassy in Paris. In a statement, Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs Bruno Rodriguez said Washington is responsible for its continuous campaigns against his country. He added that the U.S. through its campaigns encourages such behavior and calls for violence against Cuba from its territory. Earlier in a statement, the Cuban embassy said the bombs caused serious damage to the building but no injuries to diplomatic staff. The French Foreign Ministry has also condemned the attack, adding that a judicial investigation has been launched into the incident. Cuba has been rocked by protests against a deep economic crisis, the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and curbs on civil liberties. South and North Korea have restored their hotlines after over a year in a bid to rebuild strained ties. The North unilaterally severed them in protest against anti-Pyongyang leaflets in the South. The South Korean president's press secretary said leaders of the two states have exchanged multiple letters since April. In a statement, Park Soo-yeon said Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un agreed to restore the hotlines as a first step. He added they also agreed to regain trust as soon as possible and foster progress on bilateral relations. Northern Korean state media termed the move a big stride in recovering mutual trust and promoting reconciliation. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un marked the 60th anniversary of the Korean War armistice. The United States says it is committed to having a constructive relationship with China and working on common challenges. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made those remarks during a speech in Singapore in which he laid out his vision for ties with Beijing. Austin said he is willing to pursue stable ties with China, including improved communications with the People's Liberation Army. He added that though Washington does not seek confrontation, but it will not flinch when its interests are threatened. The U.S. has put countering China at the heart of its national security policy for years. Meanwhile, a top Chinese diplomat on Monday accused the U.S. of creating an imaginary enemy to divert attention from domestic problems. Beijing has opposed recent remarks by British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace on the South China Sea. During a visit to Vietnam, Wallace rejected China's territorial claims in the area and backed a 2016 tribunal ruling. In a statement, China's embassy in the UK said these comments disregard historical merits and objective facts. A spokesperson said the irresponsible remarks sow discord among regional countries and undermine peace. Beijing also termed the arbitral tribunal ruling on the South China Sea as illegal, null and void. The embassy rejected allegations that freedom of navigation is under threat in the maritime passageway. Brazil has recorded more than 500 coronavirus deaths and nearly 19,000 new cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 194 million people. Details in the following report.
Concerns over surging coronavirus infection due to the Delta variant have prompted the world to reconsider the path to post-pandemic normalcy. The UN has warned that pandemic is hitting conflict-ridden and impoverished countries much worse this year than in 2020. Amid rising vaccine inequalities, the World Bank announced a financing mechanism for developing states to purchase vaccines collectively through the COVAX facility. Over in the United States, a new study has found that a number of COVID-19 cases in the country may have been undercounted as much as by 60%. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has announced an initiative to ban discrimination against people disabled by long-term symptoms of COVID-19.
Today, finally, I'm proud to announce a new effort, the first of its kind, to help Americans grappling with long-term effects of COVID-19 that doctors call long COVID. Many Americans who seemingly recover from the virus still face lingering challenges like breathing problems, brain fog, chronic pain, and fatigue. These conditions can sometimes rise to the level of a disability.
In Europe, Russia has given the green light for the clinical trials combining a shot from the AstraZeneca with a Sputnik V vaccine. Cases fell in the United Kingdom for the sixth day running to nearly 25,000, the lowest in 3 weeks. However, in Spain, new coronavirus infections continue to rise.
We are still seeing significant differences among the different age groups, and that is without a doubt due to the vaccination in people over 40. Now, the 14-day incidence rate is around 700 per 100,000 inhabitants in Spain.
In Australia, Victoria State has announced to lift a strict lockdown after curtailing the spread of COVID-19. However, neighboring New South Wales faces an extension of restrictions after daily cases hit a 16-month peak.
Pakistan has registered 39 more coronavirus tests and over 3,200 cases in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has risen to 23,087. The country's positivity rate has declined to 6.6%. The country has so far logged more than 1,011,000 cases. More than 928,000 people have recovered. Of about 60,000 active cases, over 2,700 are critical. Meanwhile, the country has received 3 million more doses of the Moderna vaccine through the COVAX facility. In India, 6 police officers and a civilian have been killed in clashes over a border dispute between Assam and Mizoram states. More than 70 others were hurt as tensions on the border escalated. Central forces have now been deployed in the area to bring the situation under control. Mizoram Chief Minister Zoramthanga said his government deeply regrets the needless injuries. This latest clash was the culmination of tensions simmering between locals of 2 neighboring villages. A recent encroachment drive by the Assam police is believed to have added to the tensions. For more on this, we are joined by Shehzad Chaudhry, former ambassador from Islamabad. Sir, thank you for joining us. Mr. Chaudhry, we haven't seen any violent clashes over this issue in a long while. Do you believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi's divisive and aggressive approach in shaping the tone in India has anything to do with this flare-up?
Yes, unfortunately, it seems so because Narendra Modi's tenures, the 2 tenures of his first and the second tenure, has only given rise to extreme polarization in the Indian society. And many underlying and simmering feuds and disputes have begun to emerge as very prominent ones, as is evinced by the recent, in fact, the ongoing saga at Mizoram and Assam. So yes, it's very obvious. The land itself, the 7 states, the 7 sister states, as they call these 7 states which are enclosed in that Assam area, also has a history of insurgency And so therefore, it is always on a boil, sort of a boil, simmering. And so therefore, the moment the attention goes haywire in terms of Mr. Modi's central focus being diverted to internal turmoil within India, to his Hindutva mandate and his agenda for the Hindutva, and then of course his external manipulations of geopolitics within the region and against Pakistan. Obviously, the attention is off, and the Interior Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, who's responsible for this kind of control over states and their responsibilities and their problems, is unable to do so. So yes, I agree with you that the polarization that Mr. Narendra Modi's poor politics and bad politics and toxic politics has created has led to this kind of an emergence within the Indian state. Although states will have problems with each other, but these are not something that are external to India. But when you begin to see these things emerge within India, obviously you realize the amount of toxicity that has gone into the entire body politic.
Right. Mr. Chaudhary, ever since coming into power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has been largely focused on anti-Pakistan propaganda and OPS. The EU Disinfo Lab and Kulbhushan Yadav are some of the examples. Do you believe that in doing so, major issues inside India like state boundary disputes and separatist movements due to discrimination have been ignored, and are they aggravating?
Yeah, surely 1/3 of India is under an insurgency at any given time. That's a huge amount of India, a space that is covered by Maoists and other insurgencies that are blotting India's landscape. And unfortunately, rather than focus inside India, India and its governments and its prime minister's focus is external, towards Pakistan, towards Kashmir, towards Afghanistan, and in Bhutan, Nepal are the other two very recent areas of focus of Indian intransigence, as well as the fact that Myanmar is under no sort of secure position as far as India is concerned. So when you look at the surrounding areas of India and the neighbors of India, India emerges as the main source. And Mr. Modi and his government's focus towards creating more trouble and more strife within the regions of bordering India also means that polarization within India and, of course, the troubles within India will also begin to take head. And that is very obvious. And you heard that, and you mentioned that, the Disinfo Lab and the Kulbhushan Yadav issue and many other things that India has been generating out of the Afghan soil towards Pakistan all point towards the fact that rather than focus inside, India's focus and Narendra Modi's focus remains outside, and that is what is giving space and creating gaps within the Indian society and the body politic for these kind of problems to emerge.
Mr. Chaudhary, Chief Minister of both Assam and Mizoram, have been asking Union Home Minister Amit Shah to intervene and end this crisis that had been brewing for almost a month now. Why do you think the BJP government in the centre ignored this? Did they misread and underestimate the situation?
Yeah, Home Minister has been busy, following or pursuing the agenda and implementing the agenda of Hindutva all across India. Just in Kashmir, for example, in the recent Eid, when the sacrifice of animals is a part of the ritual, Muslim Islamic ritual on Eid al-Azha, there was an order that came out of the Home Ministry banning the sacrifice of animals. Now, you're stopping a segment of the society or a segment of Indian population from pursuing and following their religious responsibility. No nation that calls itself democratic as well as pursuing or following the human rights standards of the world will ever permit this. So, but that happened. Luckily, some sense prevailed, and there was a backlash, and therefore they had to call it off. So I think Home Minister is busy doing these kind of things, looking at how the courts can be manipulated towards giving the Hindus a greater right over Ayodhya and those kind of issues. So Mr. Amit Shah is actually the emblem of the RSS and the focus of Mr. Modi. And you see that in the person of Amit Shah. And therefore, obviously, he has less and less time for other issues within the nation.
Shehzad Chaudhry, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Human Rights Watch says Israeli forces' attacks on Gaza in May 2021 violate laws of war and apparently amount to war crimes. The watchdog issued its conclusions after the investigation, 3 Israeli airstrikes that it said killed 62 Palestinian civilians. It said there were no evident military targets in the vicinity of these attacks. The watchdog said Israeli forces' attacks devastated entire Palestinian families. The report also said Palestinian armed groups also launched more than 4,300 rockets and mortars towards Israel. However, the watchdog said it will separately release findings on these rocket attacks. It noted that Israel's unwillingness to investigate war crimes highlights the importance of ongoing investigation by International Criminal Court. At least 14 people have been killed in a gun attack in western Niger near the border with Mali. In a statement, the Interior Ministry said unidentified assailants attacked a village in Beni Bangu district. It said the victims included 9 people working in the fields while another was injured. Officials say they have stepped up security measures and an investigation is underway. Beni Bangu falls inside what is known as the 3 border region between Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. It has been the scene of bloody attacks by terrorist groups for years. In Ethiopia, the government of Somali region has accused militia from the neighboring Afar region of killing hundreds of civilians in an attack. The regional government spokesperson said an armed militia from the Afar region carried out a massacre on Saturday. He said the massacre was carried out in Gadametu, one of several contested areas along the border between the Somali and Afar regions. A government official said the government has dispatched health officials to the area to help the high number of injured people. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the Afar regional government has accused the Somali regional government of advancing a divisive agenda. At least 57 migrants are presumed dead as their boat capsized in the Mediterranean Sea off the Libyan coast. The UN Migration Agency says 18 people have been rescued by coast guards and fishermen. Spokesperson Safa Masali said the boat left Libya's western coastal town of Homs with 75 migrants on board. She said survivors reported at least 20 women and 2 children among those who drowned. She said the vessel reportedly stopped due to an engine problem, then capsized amid the bad weather. In Germany, at least 1 person has died and 16 others are injured after a fire at an industrial park in the western city of Leverkusen. The explosion caused a fire at a fuel depot of the Chem Park industrial zone for several chemical companies. Police said 4 people were missing following the blast. However, the Chem Park administration said the fire has been extinguished and search for missing people are underway. The U.S. says it is ready to work with Pakistan in addressing the issues of climate change. U.S. Envoy for Climate, Senator John Kerry, shared this in a meeting with his Pakistani counterpart, Malik Amin Aslam, alongside the UN Climate Change Conference in London. Senator Kerry praised Prime Minister Imran Khan's 10 billion trees tsunami project. He said Prime Minister Imran Khan's green vision in dealing with global environmental threats is commendable. Aslam briefed the U.S. Senator on Islamabad's clean and green projects. He said Islamabad looks forward to working with Washington. American billionaire Jeff Bezos has offered $2 billion to NASA in exchange for a moon mission contract. His company, Blue Origin, is seeking to make a spacecraft designed to land astronauts back on the moon. In a letter, Bezos said Blue Origin will waive payments in the current fiscal year and the ones after that up to $2 billion. He said the company will also pay for an orbital mission toward the U.S. Space Agency's technology. Bezos noted NASA's short-term and long-term lunar ambitions will be delayed without competition. Meanwhile, SpaceX just scored another major contract to launch NASA's Jupiter moon mission. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the UK, a 90-year-old is paving the way for girls in STEM with plans to set the record for the youngest women to fly solo around the world. Belgian Zara Rutherford sets off on her 32,000-mile journey in her Shark ultralight plane on August 11. Once complete, she will also become the youngest person to fly the world's fastest microlight aircraft around the world.
So growing up, I didn't really see many female pilots or female computer scientists. Those are two of my passions, and it's quite discouraging when there's no one that can relate to you that does any of those things. So then I wanted to fly around the world, hopefully have other girls see me and think I'd love to fly one day too.
Rutherford's parents, Beatrice de Smet and Sam Rutherford, are both pilots themselves. While her father was excited, her mother says she had mixed feelings when her daughter announced her gap year plans.
Obviously mixed feelings. When she first told me about it, my heart skipped a beat. It took me a bit of time to digest, and now I'm so proud and fully behind her. But as I said, mixed feelings.
The teenager will be funding the trip herself with the help of sponsors and hopes to complete the journey in around 2 to 3 months. Who said French fries were dorm food? An upscaled version of the dish is sprinkled with gold and sold for a whopping $200 in the US. More in this report.
They are decadent and flavorful and have the aroma of luxurious truffles. And according to Guinness World Records, they are the world's most expensive French fries. They are called the creme de la creme pommes frites, and they cost $200 for a plate at New York City's famous Serendipity 3 restaurant.
So it's a thrice cooked process. So we do a first blanch inside Dom Perignon and a French champagne vinegar. We'll cool it down, and then we will then do the first fry, which is at 325 degrees, and then we will cool that down and finish it off at 375 degrees. So this process is really going to ensure that it has a crispy exterior and a fluffy interior.
The dish is topped off with a sprinkling of 23-karat edible gold dust. This is not Serendipity's first Guinness World Record.
This is our 10th. We have everything from the world's largest wedding cake, the world's most expensive ice cream sundae, the world's most expensive burger, the world's largest cup of hot cocoa. We've done a lot.
Serendipity was closed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and chefs thought the fancy French fries would be a good way to announce their restaurant's return.
The International Monetary Fund has upgraded its outlook for the US and other wealthy economies. But the monetary body cuts estimates for developing countries struggling with surging COVID-19 infections. In a statement, IMF chief economist said that the 6% global growth forecast for 2021 has been maintained. Geeta Gopinath added that nearly 40% of the population in advanced economies has been fully vaccinated. She said lack of access to vaccines and renewed waves of COVID-19 in some counties, notably India, have led to downgrades. The fund cuts its 2021 growth forecast for India, which has struggled with the massive wave of COVID infections this year. The US stocks have dropped for the first time in 6 days ahead of quarterly earnings report from several tech giants. Tesla erased early gains and fell 2.5%, following better than expected second quarter earnings. Nasdaq Composite traded more than 1.5% lower. The indices of S&P 500 and DJI were also down over 0.5%. Meanwhile, the oil prices surged over tight supplies. And in the Tokyo Olympics, Japan has topped the medal standings with 10 golds, followed by the US and China on 9. On day 4 of the games, the Team Japan won the golds in softball and judo's 81 kilogram category in men's event. However, Japan's great hope for tennis gold, Naomi Osaka, was knocked out in the third round by Czech Markéta Vondrousová. More on the games in this report.
The day 4 of the Olympics features a total of 22 gold medal events. American Lydia Jacoby won gold in the women's 100-meter breaststroke to lift the United States to the top of the standings. Australia bagged their third gold as Kaylee McCowan powered to a victory in the women's 100-meter backstroke. Britain claimed their fourth gold medal with Tom Dean winning the men's 200-meter freestyle. Russians Evgeny Rylov and Kilmand Kolesnikov took the top spots. Meanwhile, China won the 10-meter air pistol mixed team gold at the Osaka shooting range. In the women's triathlon, Flora Duffy achieved instant national hero status as she won Bermuda's first Olympic gold medal. In tennis, home favorite Naomi Osaka has crashed out of the Olympics after losing to Czech Markéta Vondrousová. In men's singles, Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas beat American Francis Tiafoe 6-3, 6-4 to reach the third round. Meanwhile, Olympics organizers have reported 7 new games-related COVID-19 cases, including 2 athletes.
A 19-year-old Pakistani has become the youngest climber to summit the world's second tallest peak, K2. Sheroz Kashif also scaled the world's 12th highest mountain, Broad Peak, at the age of 17. In May, he became the youngest Pakistani to scale Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. He now holds a record for the youngest Pakistani to have summited both K2 and Everest. For the weather updates, we have Nala Shuja with us.
Thank you. We're going to start off with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be extremely hot, with temperatures rising to 44 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, thunderstorms are anticipated with temperatures at 21 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is partially sunny with temperatures at 31 degrees Celsius. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 14 degrees Celsius with clouds overhead. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, there will be cloudy weather with temperatures around 33 degrees Celsius. In Beijing, the clouds are veiling the sun with temperatures at 28 degrees Celsius, while Beirut will be experiencing some sunny weather with temperatures at 32 degrees Celsius. Berliners will be experiencing temperatures at 26 degrees Celsius with clouds making the weather more pleasant. Now heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with 37 degrees Celsius. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 15 degrees Celsius with clouds swirling overhead, veiling the sun. In Islamabad, the temperatures are at 35 degrees Celsius, accompanied by some thunderstorms. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at a 34 degrees Celsius with some partial sun in the forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Naila. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.